Right. Good evening. How are you, Geordie Dentist?
I'm good, mate. How are you?
Very good, Neil. Great to have you on, mate. And thanks for trying the new system out. It took us about 3 hours out of my day, but of course I wasn't doing anything other than going for a walk. The good news is I can see comments down the right hand side of the screen, like we can usually see on Instagram.
Right.
So we will get questions, and we're happy to take questions from everybody. This feed's obviously a lot better than Instagram. First and foremost, been a hell of a lot of stuff since we last spoke, mate. And I just want to say your actual podcast with me last week's the most viewed. When you think about all the big names we've had on, mate.
Bloody hell.
So I would say, with the exception of George Culkin, that a lot of people like to hear what you've got to say, mate. So what's your take, a week on? Where do you think we're at from your point of view?
Well, I had word through the week and I said I would discuss this because I came out a couple of days ago saying, look, 24, 48 hours. About 2.5 days ago, I got something, and I'm guessing the source must have been close to the Forbes article that got released. That basically said, look, it's done. And Forbes are going to run this. That was followed up probably within about 2 hours by a contact from a journalist here in the UAE who basically said to me, look, we've got interviews, we've got articles, everything's ready to go. I've been told get ready to push the button in the next 2 days.
Right.
And then I had a third message from a journalist back in Newcastle, who I won't name because that wouldn't be fair, who said, the word is that Mike Ashley's saying I don't want to get involved with any announcement because it's not my club anymore. And so I got those 3 messages probably within a 6-hour period.
Wow.
And it was like, wow, this is going like a train. And then, so I stuck my neck out, which I'm really not prone to doing because you just genuinely never know. But I know we're in absolutely uncharted waters with this, where no takeover has ever been. Not BZG, they didn't get anywhere near this. Not the Canadian attempt in 2012 and 2014. The 2014 one got much further than BZG, but didn't get as far as this. Not at all. And so, and then I also looked at the significance of coming up to Eid, what that would mean to the Saudis to make an announcement that says, yeah, we've got the club and this is where he'd gift to the people. That kind of would make sense as well. I probably just read a bit too much into that, but certainly I know there's stuff happening. I even know the stuff the BBC's got ready to do because I did something for them. So, I know it's all there.
I would agree. I mean, I've done 1 or 2 interviews for people, which is obviously on ice. I've done one for ITV. I've done one for Capital. I mean, I've never done that for anything other than potentially people who maybe are at death's door or something. It's not a nice thing to do. That's what media channels do, is to make sure that they're ahead of the game. Right. Okay. Well, look, before we came online, George Culkin is replying to a lot of people, as I tried to do, and as I know you tried to do. George has come out with a line which Adam Stewart's just mentioned. What do you think of people saying that it's still with the Premier League? Now, that's what George has come out and said within the last half hour, that the money hasn't exchanged hands, and that as far as he's concerned, we are still, awaiting news from the Premier League. Now, George is my go-to really for this information. And if anybody is going to know from a journalistic point of view, it's going to be him. So, do you think George is erring on the side of caution, or do you think George is telling?
I think George is naturally and understandably exceptionally cautious. The word I've seen himself and a couple of others use, Jason Burt, who's usually been on the money throughout this as well, they use the word officially. It's not officially. It's not officially. That doesn't mean people haven't been told unofficially. That doesn't mean somebody's not gone off the record. The one thing I have seen is a big disparity, and it's an unusual disparity because it's unusual for this region. Saudis have gone all in on this. Big time. which is really unusual for them. That's the other thing why when I was getting that information out, certainly one source out of Saudi and one source here in the UAE, I'm like, yeah, this is happening.
Yeah.
And I'm still think it's happening. I've got no doubt about it.
I've been confident as well. I mean, 100%.
I know you have. And
it's a lot more.
To be fair, so is George.
Yeah.
But quietly so. But he's got a lot more. He has pure journalistic integrity to lose and more besides. Whereas I'm just a gobshite in the Middle East at the end of the day.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, yes, I'm a fan. I'm a fan who's very privileged to have done all sorts of interesting things around the club and with fans groups and more in the past. But that's still, what is that really? Whereas for George, it's something very, very different. And I presume he has a very good relationship with Amanda Staveley, and that goes back a while, and it can't and should not be broken. So there's no way he's going to go off half-canned, whereas I can, at the end of the day. And people can chuck sticks and stones as much as they like. I really, at the end of the day, I feel I'm lucky in a position to be able to interact with fans all over the world now.
Yeah.
And, try and deliver a message of hope, because we touched on this last week. There's a fan base we've become into this negative mindset, like Ashley's beat with, into a negative mindset. And if you stay in a negative mindset, that's all you're ever going to attract.
Yeah.
This is the narrative we'll have to flip a little bit. That if we start to think positive and believe good things can happen to us, they are going to.
Yeah.
And it's tough. It really is tough. So that's where I think George is coming from. I think some of the other journalists are patently picking up on any scraps they can and then having a best guess.
Yeah. Let's start taking some questions, because we want to make this as interactive as possible. First question on the screen there, Mitch. I'm presuming you can see it as well as me. As I say, it's the first time we've used this medium. Jamie Vardy as a signing. What's your thoughts on that, if that was possible?
He wouldn't be a bad signing. You'd take him, wouldn't you? He proven Premier League track record, England international. Also has a bit of edge to him, and I like players with a bit of edge. I think you need players with a bit of edge in a team. Yeah.
Okay. Gavin Jones's question there. Danny Rose said he'd like to play for Brendan Rodgers, but said someone would have to buy Ben Chilwell first. Would you, 1, buy Chilwell, or 2, drive Danny to Leicester? Is he a troublemaker? It's been interesting, Danny Rose, and I haven't seen a player as outspoken as him for quite some time. And fair enough, he's got an opinion on the Premier League going back, and like Troy Deeney, he's very concerned about going back and picking up any COVID-19 infection and then passing that back on to his family. But he does seem to come out and say a lot. And of course, no matter what the situation was, he still had a set to, however you want to describe it, as we've discussed on this before, with fans coming back from the away game after a defeat. So yes. What's your thoughts on Danny Rose?
Look, I respect anybody who doesn't mind sharing an opinion and is true to that opinion and sticks to it. If somebody's consistent and honest and straight, even if you disagree with them, you've got to respect that. Also respect any player who says, I don't want to play. I look at it from my medical head. I'm dealing with patients in my day job. The amount of PPE I've got to wear now is ridiculous. Very aware of the clear and present danger of this virus. I think some of the things I've seen, the advice for players, beggars belief. I mean, again, we touched on this last week, telling players what to do and not to do in the heat of the moment of a game. I'm sorry, they're just going to do what they're used to doing, because that's what they're used to doing. They can't stop and think about it. Making a comment about wanting to play for Brendan Rodgers suggests to me he knows his time at Newcastle's at an end. Come what may, and that he's not going to be part of the revolution going forward. So he's laying his stall out for the future. Insensitive, yes. Selfish, yes. But you're allowed to be. That never bothers me. He's not really thought it through, though, because the fans aren't going to appreciate that. Yeah. And so my next question is Paul Dummett fit enough to play? when the season restarts, and if he is, there's our left back.
Yeah. Good point. Danny Ings. Kieran Bowers is asking about Danny Ings. I mean, a lot of names getting bandied around at the moment, but I mean, until we're getting new owners, it's fairly irrelevant. But is Danny Ings another one who would be on your shopping list?
You'd have to have a look at him because his record at Southampton, him and I forget who he plays up front with there, but was it Austin? No, he's gone from there now, isn't he? But he certainly he hit a purple patch through the middle of the season where he was banging them in. I think he's certainly got goals and he's proven he can do it. You want players who you're going to want a mix of players. They're going to probably want marquee signings, but they're also probably going to want solid citizens who know how to play in the Premiership. And you get that balance. That'll improve the squad. Would he improve our forward line? That's what you have to go to. Is he better than what we've got? Then probably he'd fit in there somewhere.
Yeah, I agree. Aidan McAtominay, hi Aidan. What's your thoughts on what the prospective new owners will do with regards to season ticket monies? Obviously, that's a big bone of contention for people because the season hasn't finished. A lot of people like myself will have bought tickets for the quarterfinal of the FA Cup, which of course we're not going to see now. And then there's obviously been ongoing monies coming out now with Mike Ashley departing the club imminently. And a new owner's coming in, that's going to be their problem, I would assume.
That's exactly what he's left it to. He's just shoveled past it to the people coming in. That's a hospital ball. It's one of those ones. However, again, we touched on this last week. The little wins, the small wins, the easy wins. There's another easy win.
Yeah,
they're going to get whoever comes in was always going to have a really good extended honeymoon period. There'll be relief, there'll be joy, there'll be happiness, there'll be excitement again. That creates a nice little buffer in a period where they've got pressure off a little bit. They need to take advantage of that time to then solidify as many people on board as possible. There's an easy win, right? Here's your money back. We're going to sort this all out for you. The last guy didn't look after you. We're going to look after you. This is how we're going to start looking after you. Boom, done. It's a no-brainer. If they're of right intent and right mind, that is a no-brainer, and I would fully expect them to do it.
Yeah, okay. Richard Lavender's question there: Poch or Rafa? Again,
we talked about this last week. It depends where you want to go. Do you want a safe pair of hands with a plan who knows it and has been there, done it, and got the T-shirt and has proven he can do it, and has cried out for more money, and you can give him more money? Or do you want somebody who genuinely has created exciting teams wherever he's been, either at Southampton or Tottenham? It's nice to be spoiled for choice for once, as far as I'm concerned. Poch excites me a lot if he's got the right team of people around him in terms of backroom staff, and if they want to have a director of football or a general manager or somebody above that he works in, if that's the structure he's used to, if you get that bit right, yeah, that excites me a lot. But you know what? I'd also be happy to take Rafa back in a heartbeat because he's well loved on Tyneside. And that night where we played Liverpool, and myself and a few of the lads were watching with the Liverpool fans and Goodfellas and Take On where they watch, and to a man, everybody was singing Rafa Benitez's name. That'll live long in my memory. That night, that was a hell of a night, even though we lost. And so, you would take either, but personally, the name that excites me is Poch.
Sky tonight, 8:30, Pochettino interview exclusive. Sky really bigging it up, saying that obviously they're using the line that he's been, he's been linked with the Newcastle job. We'll see what he's got to say about it. So well worth a watch tonight on Sky, I'm sure. I probably wouldn't want to watch the rest of the interview, but certainly record it and fast forward to that bit. Sean P says, do you think we'll have to accept stadium naming rights? Good way to funnel money in, but will be hard to swallow. Obviously, I think it's for me, it's the way it's done, Mitch, isn't it? I mean, Mike Ashley slap banging his horrendous brand on top of our stadium, and doing it to enrage supporters so that people publicise the business by campaigning against them is one thing. But if new owners come out and say this deal's going to be worth this, and we're going to include St James's Park in it, but surely that's the way to go forward.
Yeah, look, I'll take you back to working with my lovely friend Derek Lambias. unpopular opinion, by the way, if Derek was to come here, buy a pint tomorrow, he's not the big bad villain everybody thinks he is. He's a pantomime villain, and he like to play that role. That's maybe a discussion for another day. When he talked about going to Sports Direct Arena, it's like many things in the Mike Ashley era, it is not about what they did. It was about the way they did it. So like you say, if you as the owner say to the fans, look, I've got £20 million line up, and that's £20 million I can put on the pitch, and I promise you that will go on the pitch. But the name of the ground is going to be, I don't know, let's say the Saudi Air St James's Park, for example. One, you're still including St James's Park in it, and everybody would call it St James's Park, no matter what you call it. Two, there's money there that's an income stream that you and I don't have to fund, that the guys going into the ground every week don't have to fund. We know how this works. That commercial income is dire at Newcastle United at the moment. That's one fair way under FFP to boost it. And you get the fans on board with it. It's not hard. What you don't do is have somebody turn up with a crowbar at 7 a.m. and start prizing the name off the wall, not having told your media manager, who gets a phone call from somebody in the press at 7:30 saying what the hell's going on, and they didn't know, and do it that way, because that was done, like so many things in the Ashley era, as a slap in the face, and despite the fans, it was done just before an international weekend, so there was 2 weeks to let it all calm down before they had to play at home again, and all of those things, pre-planned, absolutely, done to maximise the punt at the backside that we've got as fans, absolutely, and done totally the wrong way. Done the right way, I genuinely believe fans would get on board with it. Yes, some people wouldn't be happy with it. You're not going to please everybody all of the time. But most people, I think, in the modern game would understand a decision like that if it was done in the right way.
100% agree, mate. Michael Bull's question, do you think Steve Bruce is being treated unfairly by the press, basically saying he's out of the job without giving him a chance?
Well, again, we last time we spoke, we touched on this. I genuinely believe he deserves to see the season out, finish the job he started. I think everybody is aware that going forward, there's no way Steve Bruce fulfills what they will want as a plan and those higher ambitions. I do think there could be a role at the club for him going forward if he's big enough to step aside as being manager. Would he want that? Probably not. I don't know. Don't know him that well. Knew his brother better, but not him. And difficult. But no, I don't think he's getting a hard time from the press. In fact, I think he gets an easy time from the press. Certain parts of the press, anyway. What
do you make of his interview? I mean, he's come out and spoken.
There's absolutely.
I don't think he would have done that had this takeover not been discussed at their level.
Nah, there's no way he would use the words he said. He was talking past tense and talking future tense for New owners. And there's absolutely no way if Mike Ashley was remaining as the owner of Newcastle United, there's no way he would have spoke like that.
Yeah.
Not a chance. Not a chance. And that's why, again, you remain quite confident that this is definitely steaming on at full speed ahead and it is going to happen.
Yeah, 100%. Danielle Lowther, great question. This for you and I suppose. Do you think this takeover is the opportunity to reunite as a fan base and stop the sniping at each other, which it seems to have been consequence of the Ashley regime? Great question, Danielle. Mitch, what do you think?
Superb question, and it absolutely, this time is one of the things we need as a fan base is healing. There have been divides that have started as tiny cracks and fissures and have been absolutely jammed in and chiseled apart. We've turned into a jumpy, almost paranoid fan base, negative mindset, loss mindset. We've become very good at firing bullets at anybody because we're so frustrated. divide and conquer is a phrase that we've both used over the last 12 years. And that's very much what he's done. You're never, ever going to get everybody behind everything. You're never going to solve every issue. But we've got to start as a fan base, like I said before, coming at everything from a point of view of positivity and love, not this paranoid hate. Because it's tearing we apart, and it has torn we apart. And there's lots of divides that need crossed, lots of bridges that need to be rebuilt. Lots of the different divisions come out with things, well, people don't know what their role is anymore. There's a role for everybody, and there's a place for every fan at Newcastle United. And we've got to find ways, and I believe this has to come from the club out. There's no other way to do it, to start to unite that. The other thing as well is this feeling like we're being got at. There's a siege mentality energy there, which I don't always like, but I think it's an energy we can use as part of that healing. Like, right, okay, we're now standing shoulder to shoulder on this, and let's do this. So yes, really good question and really good point.
Yeah, 100%. I agree. I think social media enhances this bickering and sniping, and I think, I know people sometimes think I'm a bit too paranoid, but it wouldn't surprise me if the club had used people to back the regime in over the course of the last 13 years. I do believe that PR companies will do that, and I do believe that certain points of view have been put out by those people to split the fan base, because the old divide and conquer thing works to a T, and you get fans sniping against each other. That's what it is. And I think the other thing is as well, we need to remember that it's only a small percentage of fans who are actually on social media or who have interest on going on social media. For every 10 people I could name on Twitter, I can name 100 people who aren't on Twitter. And that's why a lot of these campaigns over the years have fallen flat on their face, because people just genuinely don't realize that to actually get out and do something requires a bit of hard work and effort. And, to get fans together, you need to go and do the groundwork outside the ground, leaflet fans, you need to go to bars and stuff. And these campaigns over the last 10 years, certainly, they haven't been well supported, because the people haven't done the work to get the fans on board.
Well, I go back to when we started to set NUFC and we were turning into the trust. We did 2 or 3 road shows a week for 2-3 months.
Yeah.
It ended up becoming a full time. I ended up taking time out of work, and it was almost my full time job, and more. I could tell all sorts of tales. It certainly finished off my first marriage. Must be one of the few people having Newcastle United named in a divorce paper. Wow. And so it genuinely was that kind of hard yards, and you need that. And I think again, if the new owners are wanting to reach out, one thing that we had with BZG when we were discussing their bid, even recently at the start of this year, they talked about 100 days of meetings, 100 days of getting out and meeting fans, and they talked about having people in place globally to go out and reach out to fan bases around the world, go and visit fan clubs, and sort of strengthen the relationship from the club to the expat fans as well. All sort of part of that concept that we need to unite and heal and get everybody back on board.
Yeah. Ali Petri asks a good question. This is for you, Mitch. I've asked this before, but never heard Mitch's reply on a pod. Knowing that we know now, who would you prefer as owners between PIF, PCP and Rubens, or BZG?
Okay, right. Cards on the table time. When BZG bid, I was in just partial contact, I would say, is the way. I subsequently was able, through a mutual friend of ours, get in the room with Midhat after the bid had failed, and we talked extensively about bringing them back into the game. And we've had a small team working with them probably since last September to try and get them back into the game, as it were. Okay. So yes, I've got a huge soft spot for BZG. Selfishly, because there's work we've done Steve Hasty came out and did it mid-hat with us, and we had coffee with him in the boardroom and looked over a few things. We put a couple of plans together for him, looking at sort of, again, structure, transition, and all sorts of things. We brought a guy in from London who was Takeover based in background, that was introduced to me via Mark Douglas at the Chronicle. We had a PR company out here that we had partly on board for a while as well. Selfishly, I would love BZG to get back in the game, because I've got many personal hours invested in that. Of sitting down and working on things and working on ideas with them, and going back over what they did and where they went right and where they went wrong, etc. One of the biggest things people have always questioned about BZG was about money, how much money they had. And believe you me, I've seen their wealth statement. I know how much money they have. They had enough. PIF have got 10 times that. And I think if they've got half the ambition and 10 times the money, there's only one horse I would jump on there, and that's PIF.
Yeah.
It's a no-brainer. It's a no-brainer. BZG would have taken it to another level. PIF, if they do it right, have got the ability to take it to the very next level. And that's what excites me about it. That's why when I was told, 48 hours it'll be done, I got exceptionally excited. Because I am, and I still am. Because when this goes through, we are in a position to not be affected by as much by the COVID and the changing face of football. If FFP's relaxed a little bit, dear me, there's an investment opportunity. If the numbers I've been made aware of are right, to have 700 million ready to pump in over a three-year period, wow. Whereas, if you imagine that distributed through facilities, training ground and playing and beyond, we're not just joining the big boys, we'll accelerate past some of the big boys.
Yeah,
and it'll take time. It'll take that 3, 4, 5 years. We've got to be patient on that. But I'm sure they'll do it right, because they've got people there in place with vested interest in the North East, vested interest in the club in terms of Amanda Staveley and the Rubens, and they will help shape and guide and mould that model. And that's where we as the fan base can come in as well, to interact and guide and shape and grow together. There's the opportunities for me, and it makes me exceptionally excited.
Yeah. James Burrs' question: how do we maintain being respectful for the situation in Saudi Arabia, where it's home and away?
Very, very difficult. I've used the word geopolitics more than I ever thought I would in my life over the last couple of weeks, and I'll continue to do it. We have, but equally, I've also said openly, the world's problems are not here for Newcastle United supporters to solve. That's not our role. Our primary role is we care about our football club, and we want to see it do well, and we want to see that football club be a beacon for the community in the northeast of England. Now, that's where we've got to be mindful about some of the things we get involved with on social media, and that's where we've got to be mindful about how we interact and deal with it. I cracked a little bit this week because I got just sick of feeling under fire, because we have been really, and I don't think in a very fair way sometimes. I think I would ask supporters to think about, because our fan base is amazing to come up with brilliant chants, brilliant things you'll hear sung at the ground that sometimes make no sense whatsoever, sometimes are just plainly hilarious and wacky, and sometimes can be quite, in the Geordie way, that we can be quite cutting sometimes. And so I think we've got to be sensitive about the kind of things we come out with in terms of that, sensitive about what kind of banners or flags we want to put out. But equally, there are also two sides to every story, and there is one side that isn't getting as much of a voice. But that's where I may be geopolitically compromised, so I have to be careful here. But yeah, I think that's the way we've got to do it. It's just coming from the point of view of positivity. Steer away. Just steer away from it. Don't drag that into what happens on the pitch. But be prepared to discuss it in forums like we had the other week with Chianura in the Toontown Hall. I'm sure there'll be many more things like that. Opportunities where we can say, look, We recognise these are issues and we recognise these are problems. We are here to understand that and recognise that and respect that. But equally, it's not our problem ultimately to solve in the long run. I've also said, though, if you look at what Mohammed bin Salman's doing, he looks to Dubai a lot for inspiration. Let's find ways to make him look to the northeast of England for inspiration. That's the best thing we could do as a fan base. Is just become that beacon, that area that everybody looks at and says, hey, wow. Because, you know, the Newcastle we that you live in now and that I go home to is not the Newcastle you and I grew up in.
No.
It isn't. And you know, you and I have been to games in the 80s where things were sitting on the terraces that weren't particularly clever or nice. There's parts of Newcastle that you or I wouldn't have gone to as a teenager unless we were looking for a fight. That now we'll go to a five-star hotel or a Michelin-starred restaurant. It's become an inclusive and joyous city which is aware of its place in the world, which says to everybody, you come here and you're welcome and you'll get a Geordie welcome. And that's what we should just keep being.
100%, yeah, never change, because Newcastle is in a place which I'm immensely proud of, and you know, to be a very small part of it's a unique place, and I'm just delighted that we seem to be on the verge of this takeover by something which will change not just the football club but the city. Paul Jamieson's question: do you think the new owners will want instant success or try and build the club up from the bottom, or do you think both will go hand in hand?
My take, I think there's so much to do root and branch in the club to change. You can't do that and expect immediate success. I don't think the two things are mutually compatible because of FFP. If you could throw an unlimited amount of money into it in one year, yeah, you could probably make the two happen. What you have to do is build a platform and then spring off that platform, like Man City did. And I think we'll do it the same way.
Yeah, I would agree. I think 100%. I think that's what will happen, and you know, I think it's the right way as well. You know, a couple of questions coming in. You know, keep them coming, guys. We'll try and get through as many as possible. Stephen Lowe's, well, if the takeover goes through, would you move away from St James's Park?
There's no need to in the short term. The limitations of St James's Park and the ability to build has been well discussed. You take there are ways around it. That plan that I had an architect do a couple of years ago when we were first discussing stuff, he was a patient of mine. He actually designed the big wheel that's a Blue Waters here in Dubai, a guy called John Henry. Irish guy, Man U fan, lovely man. We got talking about football, and he got talking him about St James's Park and the problems we had about expanding it. And within 48 hours, he had this plan devised where you turn the pitch through 90 degrees. He says, "Yeah, problems at Leazes end, so let's not make that a problem." Sorry, not at Leazes. The problems is Leazes Terrace and the East Stand, so let's not make that the problem. Let's turn the pitch through 90 degrees. That was John Henry's idea, and it gets around all the planning permission perfectly. But it's a huge job, and you probably couldn't play for a while at St James's, so it's difficult. A number of bids, even go back to the Canadian bid in 2014, they were identifying sites outside of the town centre, brownfield sites, where they could build an 80,000 seater stadium. But that's mainly because one of the guys involved works for a company called Matthews Southwest. And Matthews Southwest, one of the things they do is build stadia. And they are well aware of things like this 24/7, 365 concept, where it's not just a football ground, it's an entertainment venue, it's got food and beverage, it's got mall, you can go shopping there, you can go for a drink and a meal there, and it's all income related to the club. If you want that and you want 70 to 80,000 seats, it can't be at St James's Park unless you do something radical. I still like Sir John Hall's original idea of moving it further up, and I think, again, having people like the Rubens on board gives you people who can interact with the council properly. And I still think if you go to the council in the right way, I know it got held up with the no business on the moor people, but it's a different age and a different time now.
Yeah,
It's so long ago. And if you did that and you just moved it like half a mile up the road, it's still St James's Park.
Yeah.
And that to me seems to be the way to actually get the best of both worlds. You get a wonderful new facility, which is pretty much still in the heart of the city and pretty much still in and around the place we want it to be, but it allows the expansion that we need if we only need 60, 70,000 plus if we're in the Champions League every year. If we're not in the Champions League every year, St James's Park's fine. You can tinker with it.
Mm-hmm.
You can tinker with it, but that doesn't happen overnight. But eventually, it is something. It's a discussion that any new owner is going to have at some stage. And again, the way you do it is not like renaming the ground and getting up one morning with bosh, your ground's now called the Cisco Arena. It's right, guys. This is our problem. We can't sell enough tickets. We want to expand, but we've got to leave. What do we do? And get the fans on board.
Yeah.
BZG had an idea with their Chinese construction partner of building fan parks dotted around the city, which had big screens, and you could go and watch the game live on the big screens inside the fan parks and get the match day experience, but not be in St James's Park per se. Which was again part of their bid I keep talking about is that I had a few outside of the box ideas, and that was one of them that I loved.
Yeah.
But right, okay. St James's Park's a problem. How do we get around the problem? Well, leave it as it is, but let's build other things that fans can go to experience the match day. Which, it's people might not agree with that, but again, it's outside the box. It's different. It's somebody who's thinking. Because the size of St James's Park, if we're regularly in the Champions League in the future, inshallah, then it's going to be a problem we've got to talk about.
Yeah. Gary, US question. Do you think we'll tap into some Middle Eastern talent in terms of players? Anyone you like the look of? I mean, for me, that's something that we did discuss again last week. It was probably a win-win. You bring a player in from the Middle East, then the fans over there who are already excited, it has to be said, would be even more excited if there was one of their own playing in a black and white shirt.
Oh, undoubtedly. I mean, there's talent here. There's undoubted talent here. Abdul Rahman, who's a player here in the UAE, a UAE national player, Abdul Rahman. He actually had trials at Man City at one point. He's an undoubted talent. I've seen him play live a couple of times, and he's got skill to burn. At one time, I would have had him in a black and white shirt. He's one of those players. We love those players that are a little bit maverick. Your Hatem Ben Arfa's and your Lauren Roberts, who just can do the magical, but are sometimes a bit odd. He's one of those. But the doubts about him was always about physicality, and he got a bad knee injury. He's never quite been the same since he had that knee injury, which probably backs up that physicality idea. There are players out here. There's a player there's a Moroccan striker in Saudi, plays for, I think, Etihad in Saudi. And he scored some ridiculous, like 80 goals in 60 games or something. And it wouldn't surprise us to see them sign something like that, because if they signed an Arabic player, my God, the shirt sales in this part of the world would be huge. They would rocket up. Add to that an away shirt in Saudi colours, white and green or green and white. Dear me.
Yeah.
They would sell like hot cakes. Again, little wins, easy things. These are the things. And I think the other thing I would suggest to do is you tap into the academies here, because there's a shitload of academies out here in Dubai in particular. But across the region, and again, there's talent. There's not just local talent. There's expat talent here. There's guys who like my son Joss, who played at Jebel Ali with Chris Brown. It's just football, There's lads who he played with. I know Bolton. One's at Bolton, I think. One's at Bolton. One's somewhere else. Two lads ended up in the UK and going into professional contracts. Mm-hmm. So there's talent here, not just from local guys, but from expat kids. And again, imagine signing somebody, he's trained in Saudi. Yeah. And they'd treat him like his own. They would. They'd love it. So there's loads of ways to tap into the talent here. Loads of ways.
Yeah. Alex Beebe just says, Steve, you mentioned at the beginning something about interviews with ITV Capital. Could you please repeat what that was? Basically, me and Mitch have both done interviews for different news channels, just with the, the prospect of a takeover, happening imminently. So that's all we meant by that, mate. Nothing major, but it shows that the media are now starting to take this seriously. Sal Sheikh says, are the Saudis crazy about football as we are in UK and Europe?
The whole Middle East is football crazy. And I think that's something I probably didn't know too well until I came out here, is that football is very much the game in the Middle East. There's a thirst for it. They love it. But they want the cream. They want the best. They would love nothing better than for something like a European Super League to happen. So they were playing Barcelona, Real Madrid every weekend. There was a game like that. They would go mad for stuff like that. Fanship here is quite different. I remember being asked by locals a couple of times, why you support Newcastle? Well, I'm like, well, it's my team. It's where I'm from. Yeah, but you could support Chelsea. Well, no, I don't want to support Chelsea. I'm a Geordie from Newcastle, mate. Fans jump on winning horses here. I remember when Dortmund played Bayern Munich, I've never seen so many Dortmund and Bayern Munich shirts in the centre of Dubai in my bloody life. It was bonkers. And I'd had a joke with Chris McCarty on the radio out here, who's head of sport in Dubai, about how many Dortmund shirts we were seeing in Dubai. And it was tons. They'll also support players. They'll follow players. I think I said this last week. They will follow a player. So all of a sudden, Ronaldo moves from Real Madrid to Juventus. There's a lot more Juventus supporters because they love the very best players, and that's how they get their football. Mm-hmm. The only clubs that have I would say, a big, solid fan base out here are Liverpool and Man U. But that's because they used to come out here in the 70s and they've been doing it for years. And so they've established those links way back. And so people feel attached out of that historically. But it's very much the Middle East's game. And across the whole MENA area, you go to North Africa, Morocco, Algeria, Tunisia, they're all big football communities. And the fans are passionate, just as passionate as you and I.
Yeah.
But then again, I've also been at local games. I've been to Gulf League games when Roy Aiken was sporting director at Al Ahly. I got to know Roy very well, and he had me at the Asian Champions League game between Al Ahly and Al Hilal as Saudi. That was a proper game. Police horses keeping the fans apart and everything. That was like being back home. So yeah, there's passion out here, no doubt about that.
Steve Bennett's question follows up on that, really. How much of this is a Middle East ego trip? I'm a bigger and better than PSG, Abu Dhabi, Man City.
Yeah, everything's a pissing contest, mate.
Yeah.
I've got the fastest Ferrari, the biggest tower, the most camels. It's all of that and more. How many diamonds have you got in your Rolex? It's all of that and more. That's partly why I would have loved BZG, because Dubai versus Abu Dhabi would have been properly tasty. UAE derby. But equally, Saudi will be looking at UAE, because Saudi and UAE are very much a big brother, little brother relationship, in my opinion. And they'll be looking at, well, if little brother can do this, I'm sure as hell we can.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, that excites.
Yeah. Okay. Josh Blakey's question: would you keep with the current recruitment model? I don't think we sign bad players. Nixon is good at what he does. I don't believe we've ever had the right person upstairs to see over recruitment. What's your thoughts on that?
I think that's a very interesting question. Recruitment has been up and down, to say the least. When Graham Carr was in his pomp, that he was signing more good uns and bad uns, and it looked great. But when that model breaks down, it isn't wonderful. Above Nixon, who's making the decisions on whether they go for player number 1, player number 2, player number 3, etc. I think I think they have to set out from the get-go what kind of model they want, and that the coach or manager that they bring in is happy with that model.
Yeah.
And that's what needs established. We just need a strong structure. Whichever way you go with it, the structure needs to be right. It's not necessarily about the personnel per se, but the structure.
Yeah.
And we don't have the structure. really at the minute. It's Mike Ashley, Lee Johnny, and then every man to himself.
Yeah,
and so we need to have a good structure, you know.
Yeah. Jack Chater says, thoughts if the owners changed the club crest?
I'd be amazed if they didn't. Mainly because there's money to be made out of the copyright on it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, you know, it wouldn't be the first time we'd change the club crest. My personal favourite is the 70s one, the magpie and the castle and the black thing around, but that's because I'm a child of the 70s. I think everybody has their own favourite depending on where they're from. It certainly wouldn't surprise us. I get that sometimes clubs change crests and it causes a bit of a problem. Like that proposed one for Leeds, that was goddamn awful. That again, I know some of the Dubai Whites because they also get into Goodfellas and were horrified at that. It's something you can really stuff up, but it's excuse me, but it's also another one of those potential little wins.
Yeah.
Get the fans on board. Say, you know, we're thinking about designing a new club crest.
Yeah.
What kind of input are you going to get? It's not something you could stick out on the internet because you get 10 million Macams doing stuff with phallic symbols on things. But, you know, that's the kind of football banter you get used to. But it's certainly something you can consult fans on. And also, again, you're talking about making money for the club. That fans don't have to put in. That doesn't have to come from anywhere else. So I'd be amazed if they don't change it at some stage.
Ronnie Lillico says, do you think that the Mike Ashley connections are over, or will he still have a foothold with merchandise, etc., as a term of sale? I saw you get asked this on Twitter this week, and your answer was the same as I would have given, and it's a clean break, isn't it?
Yeah, I would imagine it's a clean break, but also some of it's irrelevant. For some of the merchandise, you've got to have a third-party supplier running club shops and things like that. And if it's got to be Sports Direct for 2 or 3 years, that's something I would suck up because you're not going to see the name. It's going to be taken down from inside the ground. So is it really that? It's not something I would get my knickers in a twist over. But at the same time, when I see, and again, this may be another reason why to change the club crest, for example, you see what Ashley did to Rangers by retaining the copyright on the club crest and by retaining the merchandise. And he just chose whether he was squeezing by the neck or squeezing by the neck. You could hurt them either way. And so in an ideal situation would be a totally clean break. Yeah.
Ian said, did either of you get close to the Lambias Wise regime and were they as clueless as they came across? There's a great chapter on a new book coming out. It's a
yes.
book. Neil's had the privilege to read a draft copy of my book, Every Boy's Dream, which is out at the end of May. Is there a chapter in there about Derek Lambias?
There's a little bit about my friend Derek, yes. There's a little bit about our friend Derek, actually, yes. Yeah. I mean, you had plenty of interaction with Derek. I remember going up an escalator into a ground to see you coming down an escalator, going out at one stage because you'd been asked to leave.
Derek's number, you know, and I had Derek's number from the moment he stepped through the door until the moment he left, and I never gave it to anybody. I didn't put it out on any social media or anything like that. I'm that kind of person. But you know, look, we had run-ins, and there's a nice chapter in there about me and Derek.
I mean, my first meeting with him was when his newly established NUST.
Yeah.
Thanks to the great and the good Bill Corcoran, who found a loophole into the then fans forum that he happened to be on, I think, his cultural diversity member because he ran the Irish Centre. He got in on a loophole, and then when Derek worked out how many NUST people were in the room, he went mental, absolutely mental, red-faced, poking people in the chest, poked me in the chest. It was bonkers, but actually, over time, as the interaction came and we managed to stay on the fans forum, and he bought into some of the interaction, you could see through the veneer of the pantomime villain that he loved to be. He's a very interesting character. Mm-hmm. Very, very interesting character. I know it's one of these hashtag unpopular opinions, but he's not as bad as everybody thinks he is. He just loved that. he loved that drama though sometimes, and
he was all right in the first few days. He was all right in the first few days and months, but I mean, after that, after 2010 for me, he became the villain of the piece. And you know, it as I say, I go into that in every boy's dream. You get a copy of that on Amazon at the end of
absolutely
at the end of May. There was a question earlier.
And I highly recommend it.
Thank you. There was a question earlier on. Sorry, I can't remember who asked it, but it was: do you see a part for Newcastle United Supporters Trust at the club once the takeover goes through?
The trust should have a very specific role and a very specific place. It's something that is close to my heart because I helped set the bloody thing up. And the concept of supporter representation and fan ownership is a very strong one. How in this modern football world and how in the post-COVID world that will work, nobody knows. And so I can't really say. They have a big membership and they have a duty to represent their members, listen to their members, trust their members, and advise the club of how their members feel. I think the club has a duty to interact with the trust properly and appropriately, and should do. The only caveat I would put on is they can't and don't represent everybody, and there's got to be other ways to have their voices heard. That's the one thing. It's something that should be a strength and should be something we're proud of as supporters, and we should be proud of as a club as well. Trusts often become antagonistic with their clubs, and there's many clubs who have trusts, and the trusts aren't even invited in the boardroom anymore. And there's history of that with Mike Ashley. Some of that is Ashley's fault. I've got to say, in my opinion, some of that was the trust members at the time's fault also. And everybody's got to hold their hand up and take on the chin what they're due. But then this is a new age and a new dawn, and going forward, the trust has a very specific role and has a duty to their members to represent their members properly to the club, and also be a critical friend to the club. That's what a trust should be. The trust should be a club's critical friend. It should be somebody who should be able to say, "Whoa, what are you doing?" and not have the club get upset by that.
Yeah.
I think that's, for me, the critical role these days. It would be wonderful if they could drum up the money to buy shares in the club, but I don't think they're going to be given away by a Saudi majority owner. That's not going to happen. Going to happen. I'm sorry.
Definitely
I don't say it.
And although the trust is obviously a democratic representation of a percentage of the support, there are other supporters who aren't part of the trust who need to be represented. No. That's where we all
absolutely.
And unless, and even if 52,000 bought into the trust, then ultimately you still have other supporters who aren't members, who are worldwide and who can't afford a season ticket or whatever. So you're always going to have that issue where you're always going to find fans who say they don't speak for me. So
yeah, you're going to have that in many situations. The estimated fan base by BZG was 4.4 million worldwide. They've got 10,000 members.
Yeah,
they're democratic, they're clear, and as they should be for their members.
Yeah,
but there's as many people who say that's not for me and I don't want to be part of that. I found that trying to build it, going out to the pubs and clubs, talking to people. What's in this for me? Like,
yeah,
I get it, and that's why there has to be as many ways to communicate as possible, and as many abilities for people to tap into the club. I've got my own ideas on how that could be structured and worked. And the trust would be a key part of that.
Yeah, 100%.
You know, because a democratic, properly organised, representative of their members' trust is the club's critical friend and should be always. And therefore, they're a critical part of any communication system.
Yeah. Just under 10 minutes left, mate. We'll go off just after 7. Toonami TV says, Don, don't you see the alleged new owners go with big kit manufacturer like Nike or the old traditional Adidas, or will Puma remain as they have a big deal with Man City? What do you think about that?
I think they should think outside of the box. Personally, I've seen some stinkers from Adidas, and I'm not keen on the 3 new kits that have just been leaked for Arsenal, Real Madrid, or Juventus. this year half and half this year with Juventus, and next year's there's some pinstripe affair, almost like what Sunderland had in the 80s.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm wearing a bloody Nike FC shirt. That would do for me. You stick this on, it would do me down to the ground, but it's just a template. Yeah. And I think our new owners will not be wanting a template. Puma are tied into Man City, I think, for 10 years. They're the number one. We're getting hand-me-downs. I think next season we've got their current season's away kit in our mix for one of the kits potentially. So that's not an ideal situation. I would rather be I'd rather think outside of the box and go to somebody like Under Armour, rather. Somebody who on New Balance who haven't got a big team at the minute, and say, right, what can you do for us? Make us your number one. Give us a bespoke kit, made with the best quality you can deliver. Or, like I said, one of the ideas BZG had was to create a Dubai brand, and everything was associated with that brand was the kit and everything, and all the money coming to the club. Let's have a Saudi brand. Let's think outside the box. Let's do it clever and smart. Let's look at what options we've got to maximise the income we get from that stream, because we know when Newcastle fly high, how many black and white shirts get sold.
Mm-hmm.
And if you come up with an innovative second kit and a third kit that appeals to the Middle East, how many shirts are you going to sell?
Yeah,
that's a ridiculous amount of money. And so I wouldn't be bound by thinking, Adidas, Nike, because I wouldn't want a template from Adidas at the minute, because the templates are appalling.
It would just be, it's one of those things that I could never understand about Mike Ashley running retail businesses, upsetting fans to the degree where they weren't even buying the shirt, never mind anything else. He could have had the strips in red, white, and blue, and had his brand all over them if he treated the fans properly and treated the club and the city with a bit of respect. Muck Murphy asks a dental question: if you had a Mac, would you pull the wrong tooth out from the remaining 5 that he has left?
Well, there's somebody who spent 5 years working on Teesside and used to work in the oral surgery unit of Sunderland Royal, and regularly do operations on Sunderland fans wearing black and white stuff and Newcastle socks and things like that in the operating theatre. I mean, professionalism would stop us from doing that. I have had some good banter with, particularly with actually some of the borough lot when I worked on Teesside. I jokingly told one of them that I'd put NUFC on the backside of his crown, and he really thought I had. It took a lot of persuading to tell him that, otherwise that I hadn't. But yeah, there's certain professional lines I just can't quite cross.
Yeah, that's fair enough, mate. That's fair enough. So, Alex Beebe, we'll give him the last question because he did ask for it, and that was, so the ultimate question all us Geordies want to know is, next week, the last week of this takeover, please end the live video with this question.
Oh.
Do you think that's the case? Do you think next week will be the week, or do you think we'll have a little bit longer to wait?
Well, I've seen the date June the 1st banded around today, and it depends. I think that date's been brought up from somebody's looked at what's happening now. Somebody's looked at the the calendar. They've gone, Eid's happening. Saudi's in lockdown over Eid, so there's nothing going on in Saudi over that week, and therefore the first Monday after that happens to be the 1st of June, and that's quite neat, and it's neat from an accounting point of view. I personally think it's going to happen when it happens, and it's so bloody close at the moment. It could well be done, and I'll be disappointed if it's not done by the end of the week next week, just because we're going to have another weekend of angst from people that shouldn't have angst, because we should all be chilled about it because it's happening, guys.
Yeah, I think that's great, mate. Great way to answer that question, and I would agree. It's it'll happen when it happens, but look, it will happen 100%. Mark from Newcastle United 1980, 1994 videos. If you get a chance to go onto Facebook, if you're on Facebook, search that up. He's got some fantastic stuff on there, and he's also on Twitter. He says, brilliant points on the trust. Do you both accept that any of the reps need to be democratically voted in to represent the rest instead of a particular name being given a free invite? Now, look, I was the fans liaison officer in 2000, 20 years ago. Right? That was Rogan Taylor's dream. That was his idea, to independently have a committee voted on. I still think that's a good idea. I still think having a fans liaison officer is a necessity in the sense that they need to be there to facilitate the meetings and help. But I think having a committee voted on wouldn't be a bad idea. But I think it's finding people. I think you'd find plenty of people who would be up for it, but it has to have some kind of communication, not with just the fans liaison officer, which was the original idea, but with the board themselves.
Yeah, it's logistically very difficult. How do you organise that? How do you do that? I would also suggest that's a little bit of a pointed question, and I know who he's pointing at, and he needs to interact with that person because that person will talk to him openly and properly about it.
Yeah.
I know where that's coming from, and I don't get it. I'm sorry, because that's unfair. I think some people have to be proactive and act as a point of contact and appointed by the club. I don't think there's another way around it. Because how do you organise a vote? The structure of the trust allows the members to vote. Great. What do you do? Do you turn every season ticket holder into a member and have a vote through that way? That may be one way to do it. Not everybody's like you and I. Not everybody's used to sticking their head above the parapet, because the more you stick your head above the parapet, the more you get shot at. I've been shot so many times I've got no brains left, so I don't care about sticking my head above the parapet anymore. That's why I sometimes get prone to making grand statements. Everybody invested in Newcastle United doing anything like this they're not doing it for personal gain or glory or to be the man. People are doing it because they care about Newcastle United and they care about the fan base. And there's great people out there, Steve Hasty, Bill Corcoran, Colin Whittle, who was one of the biggest founders of the trust. Some of the lads who are on the trust board now that I know, yourself, and many more names who say that are going on and on and on. They all do it because we love the club, we want to see the club do well, and we want to make the fan base enjoy interaction with the club in a proper and right way again. And therefore, whether they're voted or appointed, as long as somebody's doing it with the right way and the right attitude and with the right mindset and is open and honest and interactive and reaches out to the fans, I don't think we should care about that too much always. That said, that's not to denigrate the importance of the trust and its structure, and that you can be voted in a clear and proper manner as well.
Yeah, 100%, mate, 100%. Okay, well, that hour's over. A lot of people saying we should do 2 hours, but unfortunately, I've got to go and do something. I have got to do some exercise with the kids. Mitch has got cans to drink.
I've got cans to drink, yes.
I am back tomorrow at 3 o'clock myself with Lee Clark. I am going to try and get him on here, which will be great. Now, obviously, this is just a system that I've only just found. I do believe we're going to get up to 6 people on here. So if that is the case, obviously, Mitch, I'm going to book you in for next Friday at the same time. We're going to have a chat next Friday. But in the likely incident of cans happening before next Friday, then what I'll try and do is try and get a lot of us on at the same time. Now that could be
magic.
It could be an absolute.
That could be chaos. That could be wonderful cans-related chaos, my friend.
I'll certainly get you on. I'll attempt to get a few of the ex-players on who I know will be only too happy to come on because they're all bored out of their minds sitting in the house. So but at the end of the day, mate, it's been another fantastic chat. Thank you for being the first person to do this. Pleased to say on average, we've had about 480 viewers on the live stream. It's been a much better stream. The questions are easy to read. And just want to thank everybody for being part of it. And as I say, we'll continue to do this for as long as we can.
All right, you've hit a winner, mate. Spot on this.
Yeah, great stuff. All right, you have a good night, mate. And I'm sure I'll be in touch in the next few days, mate. Take care. Good night, everybody.
Speak soon, mate.
Take
care.
Bye-bye. Right, that's it, folks. Back tomorrow, 3 o'clock with Lee Clark. Be absolutely fantastic. We've had a right laugh doing them over the last 5 or 6 weeks, but now we can do them on a bigger and better platform. Hopefully, it'll reach a wider audience as well. Please click subscribe. If you have a look down the list of Steve Wraith live Instagrams, you'll find a few of the ones from the last week. Not as good quality as this because they're all done on Instagram. And spread the word. If you run a website or run a page, please spread the word. Ask people to subscribe to the channel, and they'll know where to come to. Thanks very much. Have a good night. Take care.